Chapter 35-24. Junior D, what do you mean by that? Duan Huali's tone was cold and his words were full of warning. He was indeed interested in Bailey Hongzhuang, but at the moment when Di Beichen said it so bluntly, his face was obviously not as good as his. Don't tell me you still don't understand what I mean? What I said couldn't be any more obvious. A cold light appeared on Di Beichen's handsome face. He glanced at Duan Huali indifferently, and his eyes were vaguely filled with disgust. In the next second he ignored Duan Huali, put his arm around Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder, and walked directly in the direction of the outer hall. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't say anything either and just left with Di Beichen. At a time like this, her man would naturally do whatever he wanted. Seeing this scene, Duan Huali stood in the same place dumbfounded. He looked at the backs of the two people leaving, and his face was as gloomy as the bottom of a pot. Ren Ziheng and the others hadn't gone far when they discovered the conflict between Di Beichen and Duan Huali. At this moment, after seeing Di Beichen's domineering side, a trace of surprise and shock emerged in everyone's hearts. I didn't expect Di Beichen to be so domineering. He actually directly started a fight with Duan Huali. Chu Jinfeng sighed. Through his previous interaction with Di Beichen, he only felt that Di Beichen was a man who was like a spring breeze. Whether it was the way he spoke or the way he acted, he was very gentle. There was a big difference between his current domineering and awe-inspiring appearance. Duan Huali is really too much. Di Beichen has already revealed his identity, but he still harassed Bailey Hongzhuang time and time again. No matter who it was, I'm afraid they would be angry by now, Ren Zimei said. Ren Ziheng shook his head and said, that's not necessarily true. If an ordinary person knew Duan Huali's position in the inner hall, they probably wouldn't dare to speak up directly. However, Di Beichen clearly knew and yet he still dared to do so. At least this proves that he's not an ordinary person. Junior D isn't the coward you think he is. This action is not out of my expectations at all, Jing Tianlang said. Chu Jinfeng sighed, however things have already reached this point. It's not easy to end it, Ren Zimei nodded. Don't be fooled by Duan Huali's usual generous appearance. In fact, he's a narrow-minded man. Now that Di Beichen has offended him so badly, he will definitely think of ways to teach Di Beichen a lesson. I'm afraid they won't have an easy time in the future. Since Junior D has done this, he must have thought of the consequences. Don't worry too much. Ren Ziheng said slowly, no matter what, this is still the Penglai Palace. Even if Duan Huali wants to do something, he can't do it too blatantly. I still have to find a chance to remind Junior D and the others. If they don't take precautions once they're tricked, it's really... Did you see that? Just now, Duan Huali's face had already turned into the color of pig liver. Just thinking about it makes me laugh. Xiao Hei held her stomach and giggled. Di Beichen's words just now really vented her anger. Chapter 35-25. Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look at Di Beichen beside her. His handsome face exuded a charming charm as always. His slightly pursed lips revealed a cold arc. Just by looking at Di Beichen's expression, she knew that Di Beichen was really angry. Di Beichen wouldn't care about ordinary things. However, as long as it was related to Bailey Hongzhuang, it was completely different. Perhaps other people would be thinking about how to solve the problem after offending Duan Huali. However, Bailey Hongzhuang only felt a sweet feeling in her heart. Even though she already knew how important she was in Di Beichen's heart, she still felt very sweet when she saw how much Di Beichen cared about her. As for Duan Huali, Bailey Hongzhuang had long forgotten about him. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang directly held Di Beichen's hand. Their fingers interlocked and a faint smile appeared on her pretty face. Di Beichen was originally in a bad mood. However, after Bailey Hongzhuang's small action, the cold arc on his lips relaxed slightly and faintly rose. Duan Huali's face was already extremely ugly. The surrounding people's discussions and strange gazes made him feel even more embarrassed. Thinking about how he, Duan Huali, was famous in the inner hall, there were very few people who dared to embarrass him like this. He only felt an indescribable anger rising from his bones. He couldn't wait to tear Di Beichen into pieces. Peng Kairui looked at Duan Huali standing in the same place. He couldn't help but walk to his side and say, it's getting late. Let's go back. It didn't feel good to continue to stay here and be looked at by everyone. Although the target of everyone's attention was Duan Huali, Peng Kairui, as his teammate, was also very embarrassed. As Peng Kairui's voice fell, Duan Huali recovered from his anger. He looked at the surrounding people who were looking at him. The anger on his face couldn't help but become more vigorous. What are you looking at? Get out of here. Hearing Duan Huali's furious roar, the surrounding cultivators were all stunned. Immediately they didn't dare to listen and scattered in all directions. With Duan Huali's position in the inner hall, they didn't dare to easily offend him. After all, with the former's means, it was undoubtedly easy to deal with them. However, Duan Huali's angry expression made them even more sure that what Di Baichen said before was true. Otherwise, Duan Huali wouldn't have been so angry. After the surrounding cultivators left one after another, Duan Huali then turned to look at Peng Kairue and the others. Peng Kairue and the others also restrained their expressions. They didn't want to anger Duan Huali at this time. "Let's go," Duan Huali said coldly. He needed to go back and think of a way to deal with Di Baichen. Seeing this, everyone heaved a sigh of relief and immediately followed Duan Huali to the inner hall. They had stayed in the training ground for such a long time and were already very tired. Now they really wanted to go back and have a good rest to recover their energy. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three returned to the outer hall, many cultivators' eyes fell on them. Speaking of which, although they had just arrived in the outer hall, they were indeed influential figures in the outer hall. Chapter 35-26. Look, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three are back. Recently, I haven't seen any traces of them, nor have they appeared in the training grounds. I was wondering where they had gone. I'm not sure. The four of them are always alone in the outer hall. Who knows what they've been up to? Numerous gazes fell on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. However, everyone could still see that they were travel-worn and somewhat disheveled. It was obvious that they had experienced something before. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three looked around the outer hall for a while, then immediately walked straight to Li Xinkai's residence. Speaking of which, it was all thanks to Li Xinkai telling them where he lived. Otherwise, they would have to put in a lot of effort to find Li Xinkai. I wonder if Li Xinkai has returned yet. Shengguan Yingying's eyes were filled with a thoughtful light. If he hasn't returned yet, we'll just wait here in the outer hall. We must wait for him to return. Seeing Shengguan Yingying's look of wanting to tear Li Xinkai into pieces, a smile appeared on the faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two. Don't worry. As long as Li Xinkai is still alive, we'll definitely get our revenge, Bailey Hongzhuang said with a faint smile. Li Xinkai's actions were indeed overboard, but after experiencing the training grounds in the inner hall, she felt that this was a very good harvest. At least, Li Xinkai's scheme did not succeed. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three arrived at Li Xinkai's residence, they happened to see Li Xinkai and some others standing in front of the building. After listening carefully, they realized that Li Xinkai and the others were talking about the four of them. I'm really sorry. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. Di Baichen's voice slowly sounded. As Di Baichen's voice fell, Li Xinkai, Cheng Juanhe, and the others who were talking could not help but be stunned. Just as they were wondering where the voice came from, they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three menacingly approaching. Li Xinkai and the others could not help but be stunned when they saw them. They stared blankly at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, and a look of disbelief quickly climbed onto their faces. Why are you here? Li Xinkai could not help but ask. Why can't we be here? Xiren's lips curled into a playful smile as he asked. Li Xinkai's face turned pale. What he was most worried about had happened. Cheng Juanhe and the others froze in place, looking at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others standing in front of them in disbelief. The word, impossible, kept appearing in their minds. Impossible? How did you come back alive? Cheng Juanhe's face was filled with disbelief. According to his judgment, as long as an outer hall disciple entered the training grounds of inner hall disciples, there was only a path to death. For so many years there had never been such an accident. He had seen Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three enter the teleportation formation of the inner hall with his own eyes. How could they appear here alive? This was something that was simply impossible to happen. Cheng Juanhe could not figure it out no matter how hard he thought about it. This possibility had never appeared in his mind before. Hearing Cheng Juanhe's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's gazes fell on him. Chapter 35-27. Is it that hard to believe that we came back alive? The corners of Shengguan Yingying's lips curled into a cold smile as she looked at Cheng Juanhe. If they didn't know much about Cheng Juanhe before, then looking at Cheng Juanhe's reaction now, they knew that Cheng Juanhe was definitely a member of this conspiracy. In fact, it was very likely that he was the initiator of this conspiracy. After all, Cheng Juanhe was the first to answer their question about the teleportation portal. This proved that Cheng Juanhe was the first to plot against them. Master, do we know this Cheng Juanhe? Why would he plot against us behind our backs? Xiao Hei's eyes flashed with confusion. From what he could remember, they did not have any interactions with Cheng Juanhe. He should not have any reason to plot against them like this. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. She also did not have any impression of Cheng Juanhe. She was not sure why he would do this. Come to think of it, he is very likely one of the cultivators who went against us back then. Perhaps his cultivation level has decreased a lot, so he secretly hates us. If that's the case, this matter can be explained. Di Beichen slowly said into Bailey Hongzhuang's ear. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang looked up and met Di Beichen's deep and wise eyes. She thought about it secretly and realized that Di Beichen's words made a lot of sense. There were too many cultivators who went against them back then. Even though many of them had fallen, there were still many left. She had some impression of many cultivators, but it was impossible for her to remember all of them. Therefore, it was normal for her to overlook some things. If Cheng Juanhe was one of the cultivators, then the enmity between the two of them would not be ordinary. Why do we care so much about him? Shengguan Yingying was very calm. Anyway, we just need to know that he is our enemy. As for why he did this, it doesn't matter to us. As Shengguan Yingying's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two nodded in unison. This was the truth. In any case, the enmity between them had already reached an irreconcilable level. It seemed that only when the other party paid a sufficient price would it be completely resolved. Cheng Juanhe and the others glanced at each other, and they seemed as if they'd seen a ghost. According to their knowledge, there was no example of an outer palace disciple coming back alive after entering the training grounds of the inner palace disciples. What should we do now? Li Shengkai couldn't help but look at Cheng Juanhe. Ever since Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three fought in the outer hall, he knew how powerful they were. He knew that his strength could not be compared to Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. As long as the four of them wanted to kill him, he would not be able to resist. Most importantly, he didn't want to die at all. Now he regretted it to the extreme. If he had known that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would be able to return alive, he would not have joined Cheng Juanhe and the others in this conspiracy. Now he was completely dragged into the water. When he thought about the terrifying combat power of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, he knew that even if everyone here joined forces, they would still not be a match for them. At the thought of this, Li Shengkai felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Cold sweat began to form on his back. Chapter 35-28. It was not just Li Shengkai and Cheng Juanhe. The other cultivators in the group were also pale. They could not understand how Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four could come back alive after entering such a dangerous place. Even though they were filled with regret, there was no medicine for regret at this moment. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines and their minds were in a mess. They did not know how to react. Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four is too strange. Previously, so many people went against them but they didn't die. This time, they actually came out alive from the training ground of the inner palace disciples. I really don't know how they did it. A cultivator could not help but sigh. His words were filled with disbelief. He only felt that all the common sense that they originally understood had become illogical after encountering Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four. It was clearly something that could not be broken, but it became an accident when they encountered them. I don't know. These four people are just too strange. I'm afraid we're one step behind. If we knew this would happen, we wouldn't have targeted them before. Now we're in big trouble. Everyone whispered. Their hearts were filled with annoyance and regret. At this moment, they were even more afraid. Li Shengkai, no matter what, we've known each other before. I didn't expect you to give us such a big gift. We'll have to return it to you properly. Ziren looked at Li Shengkai with a faint smile. Although the smile on his face was as gentle as a spring breeze, anyone could hear the cold, murderous intent in his words. Li Shengkai's expression was extremely ugly. He really did not want to fight Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four head-on because he had no confidence in his own strength. He believed that any cultivator who had seen Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four in action would not have the confidence to fight them head-on because the four of them were completely abnormal. If Bailey Hongzhuang poisoned him, he would really want to cry but no tears would come out. Junior brother, when this matter? There might be a misunderstanding. Li Shengkai stammered. Misunderstanding? Ziren chuckled. I'd like to know what kind of misunderstanding it is. You wouldn't be trying to tell us that you've been in the outer palace for such a long time, yet you've even forgotten which teleportation formation to head to the training grounds of the outer palace disciples, right? Shengguan Yingying looked at Li Shengkai mockingly. She felt that what Li Shengkai said was a complete joke. He clearly remembered that when they came to report, Li Shengkai had clearly told them that he had been in the outer hall for a very long time, so he knew the matters of the outer hall very well. If he told them this now, no one would believe him. Li Xingkai was a little embarrassed. He only felt that his mind was blank. He wanted to cover up this matter, but he found that he couldn't find a reason to lie at all. In fact, if this was said, no one would believe it, let alone Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. For a moment, Li Xingkai and the others fell silent. They were constantly thinking about what to do. Cheng Juanhe's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4. He hated the 4 of them to the bone. If it were not for them, his cultivation would not have dropped so much. Chapter 35-29. The appearance of Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 had already attracted a lot of attention. Now that they had a conflict with Li Xingkai's group, it naturally became the matter that everyone was most concerned about. What's going on? Why are Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 fighting with Li Xingkai's group again? The 4 of them are really stirring up trouble one after another. From what I heard from their conversation, it seems that Li Xingkai's group tricked Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 into going to the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples. Now Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 has come looking for them. No way. We've all heard about how dangerous the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples are. It's said that as long as an Outer Palace disciple goes there, they won't be able to come back alive. How did Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 do it? In that case, Li Xingkai's group is really ruthless. They want to kill Bailey Hongzhuang's group. If I came back alive, I would definitely come looking for trouble with them. It's normal. Didn't you see Cheng Juanhe in the group? In my opinion, this is most likely Cheng Juanhe's idea. His cultivation was originally close to the 8th level of the Purple Realm. Now, because of Bailey Hongzhuang's poison, he has fallen to the 6th level of the Purple Realm. It's said that there's not much hope for him to enter the Inner Palace, so it's not strange for him to do this. Bailey Hongzhuang's group, who didn't know much about the specific situation, understood the whole story after hearing the crowd's discussion. It turned out that Cheng Juanhe's cultivation had regressed so much because of them. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows and looked at Di Beichen, saying, "It seems that your analysis is completely correct." Di Beichen smiled faintly, "Of course. Junior brother Wen, it's indeed my fault in this matter. I apologize to you." Li Xingkai braced himself and said. He understood that it was humiliating to say such words, but it was nothing compared to losing his life. As soon as these words were spoken, Wen Ziren couldn't help but chuckle and say, "You almost took our lives, yet you're trying to brush this matter aside with a casual apology? Isn't it a little too easy?" The awkwardness on Li Xingkai's face deepened. Looking at Ziren's aggressive eyes, he didn't know how to respond. In fact, he knew very well that no matter what he said at this time, it would be useless. "I didn't think that you would be able to come back alive. It seems that your luck is really good." Cheng Juanhe looked coldly at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. He knew very well that there was no turning back. Since that was the case, he might as well admit it openly and honestly. Cowering would only be more embarrassing. "Good luck?" Di Beichen smirked. If everyone knew what they had gone through, they wouldn't think that they were just lucky. Isn't that the case? Cheng Juanhe sneered, "The heavens are really blind. They should have just let you die in the training ground of the Inner Hall disciples." As soon as Cheng Juanhe finished speaking, the faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 turned cold. A strong murderous aura exploded from their bodies. Only ghosts knew what they had gone through, and it was all thanks to Cheng Juanhe. Chapter 35-30. Shengguan Yingying found Cheng Juanhe's anger very funny. Ever since they joined the Penglai Palace, they had always been in a defensive position and had never taken the initiative to attack others. However, everyone had never intended to let them go and had constantly coveted their things, resulting in such a result. However, Cheng Juanhe was now pushing all the blame onto them. It was simply too laughable. Everyone knew that Shengguan Yingying was right, but Cheng Juanhe did not take this matter to heart. In his opinion, the reason why his cultivation had become what it was today was all thanks to Bailey Hongzhuang. Therefore, this hatred must be blamed on Bailey Hongzhuang. "What do you want now?" Cheng Juanhe's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. His eyes flashed with a cold chill and a faint murderous intent, but more than that, there was still fear. "Don't you know what we want?" Di Beichen asked back. Hearing this, Cheng Juanhe looked at Di Beichen in surprise and doubt. Many thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. He still did not believe that Di Beichen and the other 3 would dare to take their lives here. "I did plot against you behind your backs, but if you make a big deal out of this now, it will not end well for you or for us." Cheng Juanhe looked at the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. This could be considered a personal grudge between them. Last time, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others caused too much of a sensation in the outer hall. Although they were not punished later, they must have been warned by Master Long. If the four of them had just returned and caused a big conflict, it would be difficult for them to explain to Master Long. Therefore he could only put his hope on this point. As long as they had some considerations, then there was still a chance for things to turn around. At least as long as they did not take action now, he still had hope to find others to help. It was much better than only them dealing with it. Are you threatening us? Bailey Hongzhuang's cold gaze landed on Cheng Juanhe's face. Her slightly raised lips revealed a hint of mockery and amusement, but more importantly, a hint of mockery. Cheng Juanhe was slightly stunned by Bailey Hongzhuang's straightforwardness. Yes, his words did contain some threat, but now that Bailey Hongzhuang said it out loud, he felt that his threat seemed to have lessened. You should know that although the outer hall does not prevent conflicts between cultivators, what you did last time has already angered everyone. If you continue to do this now, it will not be beneficial to your future development in the Penglai Palace. Cheng Juanhe continued. At this point he could only use this method to make Bailey Hongzhuang and the others change their minds because he was not confident that he could defeat them. If that's the case, then I have to thank you for reminding us of this. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up slightly, and the mockery in her eyes became more intense. What I said is the truth. If you don't believe me you can ask the others. Cheng Juanhe forced himself to say. However, in the next moment, Di Baichen had already kicked Cheng Juanhe. Bang! Chapter 35-31. Do we look like people who are afraid of trouble? Di Baichen looked at Cheng Juanhe coldly. Today we're here to take your lives. Di Baichen's sudden kick stunned everyone present. No one expected him to make such a clean move without any scruples at all. Cheng Juanhe stared blankly at Di Baichen, who was looking down at him from above. He couldn't come back to his senses for a while. His analysis was obviously not wrong at all. Logically speaking, any cultivator would hesitate in such a situation. However, Di Baichen was so decisive, which really exceeded his expectations. Di Baichen, you! Cheng Juanhe shouted angrily as he quickly got up from the ground. Being kicked to the ground by the other party really made him lose face. You what? Ziren looked at Cheng Juanhe coldly. You damn guys just wait to die. From the moment they decided to take revenge, they had already made up their minds. As long as they were still alive, Cheng Juanhe and the others would definitely die. As Ziren's voice fell, the atmosphere at the scene suddenly changed. The temperature quickly dropped, and Li Xingkai and the others felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. In the next moment, without waiting for Li Xingkai and the others to speak, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three started to move without hesitation. After a whole night's rest yesterday, they had all recovered to their peak condition. Although Li Xingkai's team had a total of 8 people, they were no threat to them. Moreover, after experiencing being surrounded by the skeleton army, the advantage in numbers was no longer important to them. Vigorous yuanqi burst out from the bodies of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. They had already chosen their respective targets, and immediately attacked each other agilely. Li Xingkai and the others were stunned. They didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 to immediately take action. They didn't care about Cheng Juanhe's previous persuasion at all. However, they were also cultivators with rich combat power. When they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 take action, they also went up to meet them. The battle broke out at this moment. Bang bang bang. The vigorous elemental energy mixed with the strong and ferocious strength constantly collided. The energy that spread out in all directions even shot out small holes that were almost 10 centimeters long on the ground. 12 people were entangled. Even if Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 only had 4 people, they still didn't fall into a disadvantageous position in a 1 versus 2 situation. At the sight of this, the surrounding cultivators who were watching the fight suddenly had interesting expressions on their faces. Such a good show suddenly happened for them. It was a liveliness that they couldn't miss. The strength of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 to 4. They have just joined the Penglai Palace, but they are able to fight against 2. You know that Cheng Juanhe and the others have been in the Penglai Palace for 3 to 4 years? They have been cultivators who have been in the Penglai Palace for 3 to 4 years. Their strength is indeed terrifying. Judging from this strength, I'm afraid they will definitely be members of the inner hall in the future. Fortunately, their contract beasts have just been contracted. If the strength of the contract beasts increases, then their combat power will be even more terrifying. Chapter 35-32. Previously, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 had caused such a huge commotion in the outer hall that everyone already knew that they couldn't treat them as ordinary new disciples. However, many people still didn't know their true strength and had only heard about it from others. Now that they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three make a move, they could be considered to have witnessed the strength of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three with their own eyes. Among Li Xinkai's group, Qing Juanhe's strength was the strongest. He was at the 6th level of the Purple Realm and was much stronger than Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Di Beichen didn't hesitate to confront Qing Juanhe. He saw that this guy was very unhappy. First, he had silently schemed against them behind their backs, and then he had come up with all these messy reasons to make them give up. He wasn't stupid and couldn't be more clear about what Qing Juanhe was thinking. If they had hesitated just now and chosen to deal with Qing Juanhe and the others later, then Qing Juanhe would have turned around and contacted the other disciples. At that time, the cultivators they would have to face wouldn't be as simple as the 8 people in front of them. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to make a move and didn't give this matter any leeway. Perhaps they had brought some trouble to Master Long this time, but there were some things that had to be done. If the other party schemed against them and they could still act as if nothing had happened, then that would be a real joke. Qing Juanhe had fought with Di Beichen before, so he was very familiar with Di Beichen's strength. Back then, when his strength was close to the 8th level of the Purple Realm, he had given Di Beichen a lot of pressure when dealing with Di Beichen. However, his cultivation was now only at the 6th level of the Purple Realm. Once Di Beichen used his blood aura, the difference in strength between them would no longer exist. On the contrary, his strength would be inferior to Di Beichen's. This was a very sullen situation. His strength had been declining for a while, but until now he still hadn't recovered from this drop. Now that his opponent was right in front of him, he didn't have any chance of winning. This feeling made him even more uncomfortable. Di Beichen, aren't you afraid that Master Long will blame you for doing this? Qing Juanhe couldn't help but ask when he saw Di Beichen closing in on them. Hearing this, Di Beichen chuckled and said, Master Long said that the previous matter was over, and no one was to play any tricks behind his back. Didn't you do the same? Now that you're asking me this question, isn't it a bit too ridiculous? Or do you think I'm not as courageous as you? Previously, I did go overboard by plotting against you behind your backs. However, if this continues, it won't benefit either of us. Why don't we think of another way to resolve this matter? Ever since he fought with Di Beichen, Qing Juanhe understood the gap between them. If Di Beichen really wanted to take his life, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to see the sun tomorrow. Under such circumstances, Qing Juanhe could only compromise. As long as Di Beichen agreed to let them go, then no matter what the conditions were, as long as it was something he could do, he wouldn't hesitate. Di Beichen raised his eyebrows and the corners of his lips curled up a little. Then what other way do you think we can resolve this matter? Chapter 35-33. Seeing that Di Beichen had relented, Qing Juanhe could not help but feel delighted. What he was most worried about was that Di Beichen was unwilling to relent. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, any price would be much better than losing his life. At the same time, Li Xinkai, whom Bailey Hongzhuang was dealing with, was also begging for mercy. Under Bailey Hongzhuang's attack, he could only retreat step by step. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was closing in on him, leaving him with no way out. He was also very aggrieved. Logically speaking, he should be stronger than Bailey Hongzhuang, but Bailey Hongzhuang was a completely abnormal existence. Without using the blood aura field, his combat strength could not be compared to Bailey Hongzhuang, which made him feel frustrated. Junior sister Bailey, I didn't want to lie to you before. Li Xinkai begged for mercy while dodging Bailey Hongzhuang's attack. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze was still cold. We treated you as a friend, so we believed what you said just now. We didn't expect you to trick us like this. Hearing this, Li Xinkai's expression turned ugly. Qing Juanhe threatened me. I had no choice. You guys are teammates. Do you think I'll believe you? Bailey Hongzhuang sneered, but in her heart she looked down on Li Xinkai even more. At a time like this, he even betrayed his teammates. This guy was indeed not a trustworthy person. Speaking of which, it was not a bad thing that they could use this opportunity to understand what kind of person Li Xinkai was. Otherwise, if they trusted Li Xinkai in more serious matters in the future, they would probably suffer a greater loss. I'm telling the truth. Li Xinkai was also suffering. If he had not been forced to tell such a lie by Qing Juanhe, he would not have had the heart to deceive Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Now, what he regretted the most was that he did not tell Bailey Hongzhuang the truth back then. Then he would not be in such a situation now. On the contrary, he was very likely to get Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three allies, which would be of great help to him. Unfortunately, a single slip would cause everlasting regret. No matter how much he regretted it now, it was useless. It's meaningless for you to say this now. Since you want to take our lives, you should have been prepared to lose your life. Bailey Hongzhuang's delicate and beautiful face was filled with indifference. She had no sympathy for Li Xingkai at all. She raised her hand and attacked Li Xingkai's vital points. Junior sister Bailey, I beg you, please forgive me this time. I'll never do anything to deceive you in the future. Although Li Xingkai tried his best to dodge, more and more wounds appeared on his body. He was no match for Bailey Hongzhuang in the first place. In addition, he had already lost his fighting spirit. Naturally, the situation was getting worse and worse. In the future, no matter what you ask me to do, I'll do whatever you say. How about you let me live? Li Xingkai kept begging for mercy. The wounds on his body kept hurting him. He had a hunch that if this continued, he would disappear from this world soon. It was not easy for him to get to this point. He did not want to lose his life just like that. However, Bailey Hongzhuang did not care about what Li Xingkai said. Once disloyal, 100 times would not be tolerated. Li Xingkai's words could no longer convince them. Chapter 35-34. When Bailey Hongzhuang rejected Li Xingkai, Di Beichen's words also made Qing Juanhe's expression turn extremely ugly. I don't have any requests for you, Di Beichen glanced at Qing Juanhe. I just want you to leave your life here. Di Beichen's tone was somewhat cold and mocking, making Qing Juanhe look even more like a fool. If you don't remove the roots when you cut the weeds, they will grow again when the spring breeze blows. For a cultivator like Qing Juanhe who had no bottom line, letting him live was tantamount to inviting endless trouble. Di Beichen had never been a person who liked trouble. He preferred to settle things neatly to avoid future troubles. Are you trying to force me into a dead end? Qing Juanhe's expression was gloomy. He gritted his teeth and looked at Di Beichen, a trace of disbelief faintly flashing in his eyes. He had completely underestimated the determination of Di Beichen and the others, and Di Beichen's strength made him feel that he could not escape. Thinking that he might really die here, he could not help but panic. Di Beichen's sword-like eyebrows raised slightly, and the corners of his lips curved into a devilish smile. He said, I'm trying to force you into a dead end, so what? A life and death struggle won't do either of us any good, Qing Juanhe emphasized. Hearing this, Di Beichen chuckled. You're thinking too much. It's not a life and death struggle between us at all, because only you can die and nothing will happen to me. As Di Beichen's voice fell, Qing Juanhe only felt a mouthful of blood in his heart. Although he knew that Di Beichen was telling the truth, it was enough to make him angry half to death. If his cultivation had not inexplicably decreased so much, he would not have fallen into such a situation. Aren't you afraid of Master Long's punishment? Qing Juanhe did not give up. Di Beichen stabbed his sword towards Qing Juanhe, his voice cold and resolute. You don't have to worry about that. Among Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, Shangguan Yingying was the most ruthless. She had been holding this grudge in her heart for a very long time. Ever since they had gone to the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples, she had always kept this matter in her heart. After experiencing the Skeleton Army incident, her resentment had become even stronger, and she had been holding it in without a place to vent. As time passed, her resentment naturally deepened. Now that she finally had a chance, she could be said to have no scruples at all. She only wanted to take the other party's life. Only then could she truly vent her anger. When everyone saw Shangguan Yingying's ruthless and decisive manner, they could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. From what had happened before, they already knew that among Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, Shangguan Yingying's temper was the most explosive. At this moment it was vividly displayed. Most importantly, they discovered that although Shangguan Yingying and Xiren did not have a heaven-defying existence like the blood force field, they also possessed the strength to fight above their level. They were clearly in a situation of 1 against 2, so logically speaking, they should have been at a disadvantage. However, the situation was the complete opposite. The two opponents had been chased all over the place and it was difficult for them to hold on. They could not help but feel extremely surprised by such a battle record. Such strength was not something that could be easily obtained. Only then would everyone be able to take precautions. Hearing Ren Ziheng's words, Ren Zimei and the others nodded. That's right. This matter is too important. We have to let the teacher know first. Chu Jingfeng's expression was equally serious as he said in a deep voice. Previously, teacher said that no matter what happens in the training grounds, we must inform him immediately. Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but quicken their pace. When Yizihua saw that Ren Ziheng and the others had returned safely, he couldn't help but smile. You've returned safely. Chapter 35-36. Yizihua nodded. You came looking for me as soon as you came back. Do you have something to report to me? Yizihua knew his disciples very well. If nothing had happened, the first thing they would do after returning was to have a good rest instead of coming to him immediately. Ren Ziheng nodded. Instructor Yi, we do have something to report to you. It's about what happened in the training ground. Looking at the serious look on Ren Ziheng's face, Yizihua asked, what happened? In the next second, Ren Ziheng, Ren Zimei, and the others looked at each other and then told Yizihua everything that happened in the training ground. Following Ren Ziheng's words, Yizihua's calm and tranquil face was also filled with astonishment. You're saying that 4 pits and 4 liches appeared in the training ground at once? Yizihua was in disbelief. This was something that had never happened in the training ground. That's right. This matter greatly exceeded our expectations. We almost couldn't make it back. Ren Ziheng replied with certainty, Instructor Yi, this situation is really unusual. I'm afraid this is the first time something like this has happened. I just don't know if something similar will happen in the future. If the same thing happens again in the future, it'll be impossible for our disciples to guard against it. We need to increase the number of people in our group. Otherwise, we'll be wiped out if we run into them, Jing Tianlang said. A solemn expression appeared on Yizihua's face. Are you sure that everything you said is the truth? Yes, we all saw this with our own eyes. There's absolutely nothing to hide. If you don't believe me, you can ask the other disciples. Looking at the serious look on Ren Ziheng's and the others' faces, Yizihua nodded slightly. He had a certain understanding of his disciples. Ren Ziheng had always been a steady person. His words and actions were not exaggerated in the slightest, and he would not make up lies. Since he said so, then it must be true. It was just that the situation was too inconceivable and hard to believe. If I remember correctly, your mission during this time is to take care of the injured? Yizihua asked slowly. Yes, Ren Ziheng replied. Yizihua frowned. Since you're taking care of the wounded, then your team's combat power should be very weak. How did you survive with 4 holes? On this point, even Yizihua could not understand. He was very clear about the strength of his disciples. Once 4 holes appeared, even they would not have any chance of surviving. Teacher, this matter is all thanks to a few disciples from the outer hall who accidentally entered the inner hall training grounds. Ren Zimei said with a smile. As soon as he said this, the surprise on Yizihua's face became even more intense. Oh, this matter is actually related to the outer palace disciples? That's right. These outer palace disciples should have just joined the outer palace. We've never seen them before. According to what you're saying, it was the performance of these outer palace disciples that allowed all of you to escape from danger. Chapter 35-37. The strength of the inner palace disciples had always been stronger than the outer palace disciples. This time the situation was so dangerous. Logically speaking, the outer palace disciples should have died. However, not only did they not die, they even helped the inner palace disciples escape. It was really unbelievable. Looking at Yizihua's incredulous expression, Ren Ziheng and the others were not surprised. In fact, no matter who they told, they would find it hard to believe. If they had not experienced it personally, they would not have believed it either if it was someone else who told them. Instructor Yi, these 4 outer palace disciples are really strong. I think they will become the most outstanding disciples of the inner palace in the future. Ren Ziheng thought of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 and his eyes were filled with admiration. Looking at Ren Ziheng's praise of the 4 outer palace disciples, Yizihua's eyes were also filled with interest. Since you all praise them so much, I believe that the strength of these 4 outer palace disciples is indeed very good. I wonder which 4 disciples they are? After you tell me their names, I will take a closer look. At this moment, Yizihua was already very interested in the outer palace disciples that everyone was talking about. If Penglai Palace had such good seedlings, he naturally could not miss them. He had to pay more attention to them. If he could promote them to the inner palace as soon as possible, that would be excellent. They are Di Beichen, Bailey Hongzhuang, Wen Ziren and Shangguan Yingying, Ren Ziheng said slowly. As Ren Ziheng's voice fell, Yizihua's expression changed. His expression suddenly became interesting. Previously he was still a little surprised. Since the 4 disciples were very strong, why would they accidentally enter the training ground of the inner palace disciples? After all, this usually happened when a cultivator was tricked. However, now that he knew who the 4 people were, he understood what was going on. If one were to ask who was the most unpopular cultivator in the Outer Palace, it would undoubtedly be Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. It was hard to understand if it happened to others, but it was normal for it to happen to Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. After all, the four of them had made several hundred enemies in the Outer Palace. The slightest bit of carelessness would cause them to fall into a trap. Similarly, if it was said that other Outer Palace disciples possessed such abilities, he would not believe it. However, if it was said that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three possessed such abilities, he had no choice but to believe it. It should be known that the commotion caused by Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three in the outer hall was unprecedented in the Penglai Palace. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three could fight against hundreds of disciples. This battle record was too abnormal. So it's them. A smile appeared on Yi Zihua's lips. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were really amazing. It had only been a short period of time, but it had actually brought him such a huge surprise. During this period of time he had not seen Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. He thought that they had gone to the training ground of the Outer Palace disciples. He did not expect the four of them to go directly to the training ground of the Inner Palace disciples. Moreover, their battle record was so good. Looking at Yi Zihua's understanding look, Ren Ziheng and the others could not help but look at each other. They were surprised. Instructor Yi, do you know them? Chapter 35-38. Listening to Yi Zihua's words, Ren Ziheng and the others couldn't help but look at each other. There was a trace of surprise in their eyes. They didn't know that the fame of Bailey Hongzhuang's group was so big that even their mentors had heard of them. Logically speaking, outer hall disciples were usually not valued by inner hall mentors, unless they were cultivators who had extremely outstanding performances and were not far from being promoted to inner hall disciples. However, according to their understanding, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had just joined Penglai Palace. How could they have gained the attention of inner hall mentors so quickly? This speed was a little too fast. It had never happened in the history of Penglai Palace. Mentor Yi, are they very famous in the outer hall? Why didn't I know? Chu Jinfeng frowned. He had always been well informed about the news in the outer hall. Logically speaking, he should have known about the appearance of such people. Yi Zihua smiled faintly and said, since it's them, I have to inform Long Yanwei first. As Yi Zihua's voice fell, everyone was slightly stunned. They could not help but think of a possibility. Mentor Yi, the cultivators who were rumored in the outer hall to have received a contract beast as a gift from Master Long, could it be them? Ren Ziheng looked at Yi Zihua. If he had not thought of this before, now that Yi Zihua mentioned Long Yanwei, there was only one possibility left when these two things were connected. It seems that you know them well, Yi Zihua said with a smile. As soon as these words came out, everyone understood. Suddenly their expressions became a little more interesting. Chu Jinfeng could not help but remember when he first met Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. He had asked them about these guys who had turned the outer hall upside down. He did not expect it to be Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. As soon as he remembered Bailey Hongzhuang's faint awkward expression, he understood. It turns out that the famous cultivators in the outer hall are the four of them. We were too slow to realize it. Ren Zimei's face revealed a sigh, and there was a hint of annoyance. She should have thought of it back then, but she didn't expect her reaction to be so slow. Only now did she understand the crux of the matter. That's right. There are also four famous disciples in the outer palace. They are also four people. Plus they are also very popular. Why didn't we think of that? Ren Ziheng couldn't help but pat his own head. He originally wanted to wait until he had reported this matter to the teacher before he went to see the few disciples from the outer palace. After all, to be able to obtain Lord Long's contracted beast as an outer palace disciple was not an easy task. Unexpectedly, he had already met Lord Long. Yi Zihua chuckled, you guys were able to get to know them so early and get along so well. This is also a kind of fate. Instructor Yi, will they be joining the inner palace soon? Ren Zimei could not help but ask. Just from Long Yanwei's different attitude towards Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, it was enough to prove that their starting point was completely different from the ordinary outer palace disciples. Becoming an inner palace disciple was already a sure thing, and the rest was only a matter of time. Chapter 35-39. Long Yanwei was originally resting in his house, but when Yi Zihua suddenly sent someone to find him, he immediately went to Yi Zihua's residence. As soon as he walked into the house, Long Yanwei saw Ren Ziheng and the others standing there, and a hint of surprise appeared on his handsome and calm face. His gaze then landed on Yi Zihua and said, why are you in such a hurry to find me? Could it be that something has happened? Yizihua nodded. Something has indeed happened. I think you need to understand it. Noticing that Yizihua's expression was extremely serious, and there was even a hint of seriousness, Long Yanwei's expression also changed a little, and he carefully listened to Yizihua's description. You're saying that the situation in the training grounds has changed. 4 pits have appeared at once, and the frequency of the liches has greatly increased? Long Yanwei said in a deep voice. That's right. If such a situation really occurs, then when our disciples go to the training grounds in the future, the danger will greatly increase. It is absolutely not to be ignored. You're right. Long Yanwei's gaze sank and his face was filled with thought. There will be some new changes in the training grounds every few years. Whether it's the skeletons or the liches, there will be some new changes. Compared to the last time, it has indeed been a long time, so it's not too strange for such a situation to occur. In my opinion, it's better for us to inform the hall master of this matter first. We still need to send someone to understand the specific situation in detail. The hall master has already returned. We should indeed report this news as soon as possible. Long Yanwei nodded, and then his gaze shifted to Ren Ziheng and the others. 4 pits appeared at once, and you little fellows were still able to return alive. Looks like your recent growth and strength is not bad. As expected of Yizihua's favorite disciple. Following Long Yanwei's words, Yizihua laughed softly and then said, Speaking of this matter, the reason why they were able to return safely has a lot to do with you. The moment these words were spoken, Long Yanwei could not help but be stunned. He frowned slightly and said, What does this have to do with me? The reason they were able to return safely is all thanks to the 4 cultivators you recruited. Otherwise they would have been completely wiped out this time. Yizihua looked at Long Yanwei in admiration. This time I really have to admire your foresight. You've really recruited 4 genius cultivators. If Long Yanwei didn't understand what Yizihua meant before, now that he heard him mention 4 cultivators, he immediately understood. He didn't recruit any cultivators recently, and the only ones he recruited were Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. Are you saying that this matter has something to do with Di Beichen and the others? Long Yanwei couldn't help but ask. That's right, it's them. Yizihua chuckled. Their battle prowess is truly extraordinary. When they caused such a commotion in the outer hall, it was already shocking. I did not expect that with their strength, they would be able to achieve such a feat in the training grounds of the inner hall. This has truly exceeded my expectations. However, after hearing Yizihua's words, the confusion in Long Yanwei's heart grew even stronger. Chapter 35-40. What do you think is the reason? Yizihua asked instead of answering the question. Long Yanwei pondered for a second after hearing Yizihua's words. He raised his eyebrows and asked, Were they tricked? Yizihua nodded. With their popularity in the outer palace, this situation isn't strange at all. Ren Ziheng and the others couldn't help but laugh when they heard this. Even though they hadn't seen it before, they felt that it was normal when they thought about the reputation of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 in the outer palace. By the way, Instructor Yi, according to our understanding this time, one of the liches seems to have evolved. The liches have evolved? Yizihua and Long Yanwei looked at Ren Ziheng together with surprise in their eyes. Ren Ziheng nodded, but his voice was filled with uncertainty. We can't be completely sure about this matter, but the last lich is indeed different from the liches we've seen before. The person who understands this the most is Bailey Hongzhuang. She was also the one who proposed the lich's evolution. Why is Bailey Hongzhuang the one who understands it the most? Because in the process, Bailey Hongzhuang had been using her zither technique to deal with the lich's chanting. If it wasn't for her suppressing the lich's chanting, we wouldn't have been able to come back alive. Ren Ziheng had no intention of hiding anything. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were indeed their saviors this time, especially Bailey Hongzhuang's outstanding performance. This was something they couldn't hide at all. Yizihua and Long Yanwei's eyes lit up when they heard Ren Ziheng's words. They asked again, You're saying that Bailey Hongzhuang has a way to suppress the lich's chanting? That's right. When we first discovered this, we were also very surprised. However, later on, the situation showed that Bailey Hongzhuang's zither technique can really suppress the lich's chanting. Moreover, it has a certain restraining effect on the skeleton army. As Ren Ziheng spoke, Ren Zimei and the others also expressed their opinions, proving that everything Ren Ziheng had said was true. Yizihua and Long Yanwei looked at each other. If all of this was true, then Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 had really brought them a huge surprise. One must know that the skeleton army and the lich had been around for a long time. Dealing with the skeleton army only required violent means. But to deal with the Lich, no one could think of a good method. Under the protection of the skeleton army, everyone had to pay a huge price to deal with the Liches, and they had no idea how to suppress the Lich's chanting. Every time a Lich appeared, it gave everyone a headache. Who would have thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would have a way to subdue a Lich? It was a pleasant surprise. We already know about this matter. You guys have worked hard this time. Go back and have a good rest. Leave the rest to me. Yizihua looked at Ren Ziheng and the others and said slowly. When they heard this, Ren Ziheng and the others understood that Yizihua and Long Yanwei were going to deal with this matter, and they immediately bowed and bid their farewells. Chapter 35-41. Long Yanwei smiled faintly. Originally, I was a little worried that the incident last time was too big and I didn't know how to report it to the palace master when he returns. Now that we have such a reward, I can report it to the palace master. Yizihua let out a hearty laugh. You're right. The commotion caused by these fellows last time was simply too big. It was indeed difficult to explain to the palace master. Now we don't have to worry. With the results they have obtained this time, the previous troubles are nothing. Long Yanwei glanced at Yizihua and said, Now, let's find Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three so that we can understand the situation better. Yizihua nodded and immediately sent people to the outer hall to find Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. When Ren Ziheng and the others found out that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were the outer hall disciples that they had been very interested in, they sighed in their hearts. I really didn't expect them to be the outer hall disciples who have been in the limelight recently. We're really too late to realize it. Ren Zimei shook her head and sighed. No wonder their strength is so outstanding. When I heard that they had caused trouble in the outer hall, I didn't quite believe it. After all, their battle results were too frightening. But now I believe it. Just by looking at their battle strength against the skeleton army, nothing is impossible. Chu Jinfeng's face revealed a look of amazement. He had been half believing and half doubting before, thinking that the rumors were exaggerated. Now he firmly believed it without a doubt. I understand why Di Beichen was not the least bit nervous when facing Duan Huali. On the contrary, he dared to go tit for tat. With his strength in the inner hall, he will definitely be an influential figure in the future. Ren Ziheng slowly said. Isn't that great? Chu Jinfeng's eyes lit up. Duan Huali definitely doesn't know the true identity of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. If he knew, I'm sure he would be more restrained. Just as they were walking towards their residence, they saw Yizihua's men quickly walking towards their direction. Everyone couldn't help but be curious and asked what the other party was going to do. When they found out that the other party was going to look for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, their faces were filled with joy. Let's go take a look as well. They've been hiding our true identities. Now that we know, we can't pretend that we don't know. Chu Jinfeng's face flashed with interest. Although Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had never told them their true identities, he didn't think it was a big deal. In his heart, after the previous battle, they were already friends who went through life and death together. Moreover, they were not stupid people. They all understood why Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were hiding the truth from them. After all, they had obtained a contract beast as a gift from Lord Long. This matter was indeed too enviable. Just outside the outer hall, they had already caused such a huge commotion. If it were him, he wouldn't dare to reveal his true identity to the disciples of the inner hall. If he wasn't careful, it would attract even more trouble and could even lead to a fatal disaster. Hearing Chu Jinfeng's words, Ren Zimei and the others couldn't help but look at each other. They then nodded and smiled. Chapter 35-42. When Ren Ziheng and the others followed Yizihua's men to the outer hall to look for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, they did not see Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three at their residence. After asking around, they found out that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had not returned to their residence. Seeing this, Ren Ziheng and the others could not help but look at each other. They have obviously returned, but they have not returned to their residence. Could it be that as soon as they came back, they immediately went to find someone to settle the score? Ren Zimei could not help but ask. This is very likely. They were set up before and must have been holding it in. Now that they are back, it is normal for them to seek revenge. Chu Jinfeng nodded, and his eyes gradually brightened. Other than this possibility, he could not think of any other reason. Just thinking about Shengguan Yingying's violent temper, I think this is the only reason. A smile appeared in Ren Ziheng's eyes. I'm afraid there will be a good show to watch. Seeing that Chu Jinfeng and Ren Zimei had the same idea as her, Ren Zimei also sighed. She did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three to be so efficient. They had just returned and without resting they had already gone to look for them. It seemed that Shangguan Yingying was not the only one in their team with a violent temper, but all of them were very impatient. Yizihua's men did not know what was going on at first, but now that he heard the conversation between Ren Ziheng and the others, he understood. You mean Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three went to seek revenge? If we guessed correctly, that should be the case. Then do you know where they went to seek revenge? Yizihua's men were a little helpless. He did not know much about Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. The outer hall of Penglai Palace was not very big, but it was not small either. If he did not know anything, it would take some time to find them. Then we don't know. Ren Ziheng frowned. They only knew that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had been tricked by the cultivators from the outer palace. However, they did not know who exactly it was. They had asked about it before, but Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were very firm. They wanted to leave this matter to them, so they didn't ask too much. Moreover, now that they knew the true identities of Bailey Hongzhuang's group, they were clearly aware of how many enemies Bailey Hongzhuang's group had in the outer palace. As for which enemy they were looking for, it was not something that could be determined in a short period of time. That's going to be troublesome. Yizihua's subordinate had a worried look on his face. Yizihua had asked him to look for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three because he had something to ask of them. However, judging from the current situation, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to find them for a while. Seeing this, Ren Ziheng couldn't help but say, "Why don't we split up and look for it? If I'm not mistaken, they should be in the residence of the outer palace disciples. They won't go anywhere else." Hearing this, the man's eyes lit up and he said, "Then I'll have to trouble you." "It's fine." Immediately after, Ren Ziheng and the others split up and looked for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. They were very interested in Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's revenge. They wondered how far they would go. Chapter 35-43. At the same time, a burst of noise came from the front. Seeing this scene, Ren Ziheng and the others who were about to split up to search, could not help but stop in their tracks. They looked at each other and their expressions suddenly became interesting. No one spoke, but their eyes were focused on the same place. In the next second, everyone walked forward without hesitation. As everyone gradually approached, they found that most of the cultivators had gathered in front of them. The area was completely surrounded, and even they found it difficult to enter. Such a big commotion, could it be caused by Junior Brother D and the others? Ren Zimei asked in surprise. Chu Jinfeng chuckled. If I didn't know the true identity of Junior Brother D and the others, I definitely wouldn't have thought that such a big commotion would be caused by them. However, after knowing their true identity, I feel that there is no one else in such a situation other than them. As soon as these words came out, Ren Zimei and the others looked at each other and felt that Chu Jinfeng's words were extremely reasonable. If this is really caused by them, then it's really beyond my expectations. Ren Ziheng sighed. Previously, he had always thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were very outstanding, but they had always been very low-key and humble. However, now it seemed that they were extraordinarily high-profile in the outer hall. The number of onlookers was really too many. Ren Ziheng and the others tried their best to squeeze in, but found that they could not even find a gap. However, even if they did not see what happened in front of them clearly, they could determine the main characters of the incident from the discussions of the surrounding cultivators. Li Xingkai and the others are definitely going to die now. I didn't expect them to court death by going against Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. It's expected that they would end up like this. From the beginning, I felt that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were not ordinary people. Fortunately, I didn't offend them before. According to my prediction, they will definitely be the 4 ruthless people of Penglai Palace in the future. You're right. In my opinion, if we can't build a good relationship with Bailey Hongzhuang and the others in the future, at least we can't offend them. Otherwise, we will really suffer the consequences. Ren Ziheng and the others also heard the conversations of the crowd clearly. They could not help but sigh in their hearts. These words were not said from the mouths of 1 or 2 cultivators, but many cultivators in the outer palace held such an attitude. This proved that although Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 was not very popular in the outer palace, in everyone's hearts, they were already very powerful. They had only been in Penglai Palace for a short time, but they could make everyone be so sure of their strength. This was not something an ordinary cultivator could do. This alone had already laid the foundation for their future development. The sounds of fighting kept coming, and Ren Ziheng and the others also knew that Li Xingkai and his men were retreating step by step under the attacks of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. Even if they kept begging for mercy, it was to no avail. Chapter 35-44. This is also a good thing. Otherwise, Duan Huali would think too highly of himself. Ren Zime could not help but curl her lips at the mention of Duan Huali. She could not hide the disgust that was spreading from the bottom of her heart. I'm actually looking forward to Duan Huali finding out the truth later. Only then will there be a good show to watch. Chu Jinfeng smiled. Yizihua's subordinate took a look at the situation and could not help but frown. He did not expect such a scene after arriving. It was very difficult to squeeze in. Most importantly, based on his understanding, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had caused a huge commotion in the outer hall. It had only calmed down recently. He did not expect it to start again. Thinking of this, the man could not help but look at Ren Ziheng and the others. He said, "The commotion now is really too big. I'll go back and report to Instructor E first." Hearing this, Ren Ziheng and the others nodded. If there was no instructor to oversee the situation, it would be impossible to evacuate everyone. Yizihua and Long Yanwei had been waiting in the room to see Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. However, after waiting for a long time, they did not see anyone return. The two of them could not help but frown. Logically speaking, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three should have been found after such a long time. Why was there no movement at all? Just as the two of them were wondering if something had happened, a knock on the door rang out. The two of them could not help but sigh in relief. "Come in," Yizihua slowly said. In the next moment, Yizihua's subordinate walked in. After he walked in, Yizihua and Long Yanwei looked around. However, they did not see Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three behind him. The two of them could not help but feel puzzled. "Why aren't they here?" Yizihua asked in surprise. "Instructor E, they seem to have caused some trouble outside." Yizihua and Long Yanwei were stunned when they heard this. "What trouble?" "I went to the outer palace and found them fighting with other cultivators. The situation was very intense. Almost all the cultivators in the outer palace were attracted to them. Now that area is completely surrounded. Even if I wanted to squeeze in, there's no other way." The man helplessly reported the situation he saw in full detail. After understanding the situation, Yizihua and Long Yanwei couldn't help but look at each other. Who knew that a helpless expression would appear on both of their faces? "Yanwei, I have to say that you have a good eye for people. However, the way these four little fellows stir up trouble is not ordinary. Now that they've just returned, they've already caused such a huge commotion. I'm afraid that in the future, there won't be a moment of peace in the outer palace." Chapter 35-45. Forget it. Since we have nothing to do now, why don't we go outside and take a look? Long Yanwei pondered for a moment before speaking. Yizihua nodded. "All right." When Yizihua and Long Yanwei arrived at the outer palace disciples' quarters, they noticed a sea of people. Almost all the outer palace disciples had gathered together. From their point of view, all they could see was a sea of heads. They could not see Bailey Hongzhuang and the others at all. However, based on the fluctuation of yuan power, they could still determine that a battle was taking place at the center of the crowd. Lord Long and Instructor E are here. Long Yanwei and Yizihua's appearance had undoubtedly attracted the crowd's attention. Hence, cultivators immediately began to spread the news. Long Yanwei and Instructor Yi's appearance had clearly exceeded the crowd's expectations. In an instant, the crowd's expressions became very interesting. I never thought that Lord Long and the others would actually show up. Could it be that they had specially rushed over after hearing about Bailey Hongzhuang and the others? Now that Lord Long and the others have appeared, Li Xingkai and the others can be saved. Sigh, I never thought that Qing Juanhe and the others would be so lucky. They were already at death's door and there was still a chance for them to turn things around. Qing Juanhe's face was extremely pale and the wounds on his body were increasing. He was almost certain that he would not be able to live past today. However, just as he was about to lose all hope, he suddenly heard from the crowd that Lord Long and Instructor E had appeared. To him, these words were no different from the sounds of nature and had saved him from hell. A hint of color quickly returned to his originally pale face. His eyes were filled with joy as he looked at Di Beichen. Lord Long and the others have arrived. I advise you to stop now. A hint of hesitation flashed across Di Beichen's face when he found out that Long Yanwei and Instructor E had arrived. This had truly exceeded his expectations. However, regardless of whether Long Yanwei and Instructor E had arrived or not, he would definitely kill Qing Juanhe. At the same time, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others paused for a moment. They were almost done with their task, but they didn't expect Master Long and the others to come. Should they continue or stop? It was a question that they had to consider. After all, if they continued to attack, it would probably cause Long Yanwei to feel displeased. But if they stopped, then Qing Juanhe and the others would think of a way to escape, and even find more opponents to deal with them. In this way things would become much more troublesome. When Qing Juanhe saw Di Beichen and the others hesitating, the smile on his face couldn't help but widen. He said, "I advise you to stop now. Otherwise, when Lord Long blames you, you won't be able to bear the consequences. It's best that you don't mention the matter of us tricking you all to the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples. Even if you mention it, we will not admit to it. No one will believe you without any proof." A thick smile appeared on Qing Juanhe's face. It was as if he had found his backbone in an instant, and he became somewhat unrestrained. Di Beichen frowned slightly when he saw Qing Juanhe's smug look. In the next moment, a dark light flashed in his bottomless black eyes. "So what if other people don't believe you? A guy like you should just die and be reincarnated." Chapter 35-46. Qing Juanhe did not expect that Di Beichen would still dare to attack him after Master Long appeared. In his opinion, Di Beichen should be very wary of Master Long. Now that Master Long appeared, Di Beichen would stop immediately and even think about how to explain this matter to Master Long. However, he never expected that Di Beichen would not play by the rules. Caught off guard, Di Beichen's attack completely landed on Qing Juanhe's body. Bang! Qing Juanhe's figure flew out and felt a huge force hit his body. Intense pain came from his internal organs, and his whole body felt as if it was about to shatter. Everyone was dumbfounded after seeing Di Beichen's actions. No one expected that Di Beichen would dare to do such an outrageous thing under such circumstances. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two's reactions were completely different from the onlookers. After seeing Di Beichen attack, they did not hesitate to speed up their movements. Since the enmity between the two sides had already been formed, the final outcome would inevitably be the fall of one side. Today they had already come to this point, and there was no possibility of reconciliation between the two sides. Why waste time and give the other side more time to prepare? Wouldn't that be causing trouble for themselves? Therefore Bailey Hongzhuang and the others only looked at each other, and in the next second they directly took each other's lives. Li Xingkai originally thought that his savior had arrived, and he could not help but feel happy in his heart. His gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang became a little more resentful. He begged for mercy in every possible way, but he only received cold words from the other party, who did not give him any chance at all. He also bore a grudge against Bailey Hongzhuang, and only hoped that after this matter was over, he could get back at her. However, after seeing the flash of killing intent in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes, he could not help but feel a strong sense of fear in his heart. "Lord Long, save me!" Li Xingkai shouted. His sharp voice cut through the sky and resounded in the crowd. After Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua appeared, the surrounding cultivators all opened up a path for them to enter. Suddenly hearing Li Xingkai's call, Long Yanwei couldn't help but frown, and his footsteps quickened. As Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua walked into the crowd, they saw Bailey Hongzhuang's sharp blade fiercely stabbing into Li Xingkai's chest. There was no hesitation at all, only decisiveness and decisiveness. Li Xingkai's eyes widened as he stared blankly at Bailey Hongzhuang. His face was still filled with disbelief. He simply could not believe that Bailey Hongzhuang dared to take his life in front of Master Long. However, the intense pain in his body was real, and so was the blood flowing out of his chest. He could only feel his life gradually slipping away. No matter how hard he tried to believe it, this ending could no longer be changed. While Bailey Hongzhuang was doing this, Di Beichen, Wen Ziren, and Shengguan Yingying had also taken care of the other cultivators. Chapter 35-47. Since they had already done it, they might as well do it all at once. Ren Ziheng and the others followed behind Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua and arrived at the center of the crowd. However, they were dumbfounded when they saw what had happened. There were clearly many cultivators surrounding them, but at this moment, the surroundings were strangely quiet. Astonished gazes gathered on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Their gazes were filled with shock and disbelief. However, the silence only lasted for a short while. When the crowd finally returned to their senses, discussions quickly surged like a tidal wave. Heavens, Di Beichen and the others are too audacious. Lord Long is already here and they still dare to attack. Aren't they worried about Lord Long's punishment? From what I can see, They're worried that it would be troublesome to deal with Cheng Juanhe and the others after Lord Long has stopped them. That's why they might as well use this opportunity to get rid of them all at once. That's true, but they're not giving Lord Long any face by doing this in front of him. The crowd sighed. For a moment, their gazes towards Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were filled with excitement. Ren Ziheng and the others clearly did not expect this to happen. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had still done this after Lord Long had appeared. It was no different from challenging Lord Long's dignity. What they've done seems to be a bit out of line. A worried look appeared on Ren Ziheng's face. If there were not so many cultivators around, or if Lord Long had not appeared, the situation would not have been so serious. After all, as long as they had gotten rid of Li Shengkai and the others before Lord Long appeared, even if Lord Long was angry, it would be after the fact. However, he believed that the punishment would not be too severe by then. However, with so many cultivators around, Lord Long was in a very awkward position in front of so many people. If he did not punish them severely, it would be difficult to convince the crowd. Ren Ziheng's face flickered with a thoughtful light. He then said in a deep voice, "Actually, their actions are not wrong. If we give them a chance to breathe, I'm afraid that they'll be in even more trouble in the future. Although we don't know what kind of role Li Shengkai and the others have in the outer palace, the fact that they were able to trick Bailey Hongzhuang and the others into going to the training grounds of the inner palace is enough to prove that their methods are not simple. But if that's the case, I'm afraid there will be some estrangement between Master Long and them," Chu Jinfeng said slowly. According to his understanding, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were recruited into the Penglai Palace by Master Long. They also received Master Long's favor and obtained 3 contract beasts. This was the first time in the history of the Penglai Palace. Logically speaking, they should have a very good relationship with Master Long, but now that this had happened, he couldn't tell how things would develop in the future. When Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua saw this scene, their expressions could not help but change. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 reacted very quickly. After putting away their weapons, they immediately bowed to Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua and said respectfully, "Greetings, Master Long." "Greetings, Instructor Yi." Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua felt helpless when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3's calm faces. Chapter 35-48. Why are Master Long and Instructor Yi free to come to the outer hall today? Di Beichen's face was filled with a humble and polite smile, as if he wasn't the one who had taken their lives. "That's right, we just came back from our training and were preparing to visit Master Long and Instructor Yi later." Xiren's face also quickly revealed a sunny smile. His entire person was as bright as the morning sun, as if he didn't know their current situation at all. It was as if killing Li Shengkai and the others was an extremely ordinary thing that had nothing to do with the environment in front of him. Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Yingying also smiled as they looked at Long Yanwei and Xiren, revealing a bit of cleverness. That tranquil appearance had nothing to do with their previous ruthlessness. Seeing Di Beichen and the other 3 acting as if nothing had happened, Yi Zihua glanced at Long Yanwei. "These guys aren't ordinary troublemakers. It seems like you have a lot of mess to clean up behind them." Hearing Yi Zihua's words, a trace of helplessness appeared on Long Yanwei's face. When these guys cheated him of the demon pet eggs, he already knew that these guys weren't easy to deal with. He had traveled extensively all these years, and there were very few people who could make him suffer. However, he had to admit that he had indeed fallen into the hands of these 4 little fellows. "What were you doing just now?" Long Yanwei slowly said. Hearing Long Yanwei's question, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 couldn't help but look at each other. They were very clear in their hearts that their reckless actions just now had undoubtedly touched Long Yanwei's prestige. Especially in front of everyone, if they couldn't give an explanation, it would be tantamount to making Long Yanwei lose face. This wasn't a good thing. Firstly, Long Yanwei had always been very good to them, and they didn't want to make Long Yanwei lose face. Secondly, if Long Yanwei was dissatisfied with them because of this wasn't something they wanted to see. "Master Long, we were just dealing with some personal grudges." Di Beichen's expression was calm as he calmly narrated. In his opinion, this wasn't a big deal. In the outer hall, fights between cultivators had never stopped, and bloody incidents were common. This was something that everyone was used to. Right now, the most important thing was that after Master Long appeared, they still took the other party's life, which was somewhat disregarding Master Long's dignity. Therefore, as long as they could cover up this point, there wouldn't be any problems. Seeing Di Beichen's answer, Long Yanwei was somewhat speechless. His original intention of asking this question was, but Di Beichen's answer, which made him not knowing how to continue. When Ren Ziheng and the others saw that the situation seemed to be a little off, they couldn't help but stand up and say, "Master Long, these guys should be the ones who tricked them into coming to the inner hall to train. It's normal for such grievances to be resolved like this." "That's right. If it weren't for junior brother and junior sister's luck, they wouldn't have made it back alive," Ren Zimei said. "Every injustice has its perpetrator and every debt has its debtor. This is how it should be," Chu Jinfeng said. Chapter 35-49. Seeing that Ren Ziheng and the others actually stood up for them at this time, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three also had a look of surprise in their eyes. Then it turned into gratitude. Under such circumstances, it was easy to offend Master Long if they were not careful. For any disciple of Penglai Palace, this was something that they did not want to see. Therefore they could still take such a risk and stand up for them. Just this friendship was already very precious. When Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua saw the actions of Ren Ziheng and the others, a trace of surprise quietly flashed in the depths of their eyes. Then it disappeared in the blink of an eye. It seemed that they still underestimated the friendship between Ren Ziheng and the others and Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Long Yanwei naturally knew that the previous actions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had indeed damaged his dignity. However, he himself did not take this kind of thing to heart. Moreover, as soon as he knew that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three went to the training ground of the Inner Palace disciples after being tricked, he had already expected that with the temper of these four guys, they would definitely find the other party to settle the score. However, he did not expect them to do it so ruthlessly and decisively. In fact, he knew very well in his heart that even if it were him, he would definitely not let go of such an opponent who wanted to take his life. Thinking of this, Long Yanwei did not feel any anger in his heart. Moreover, the results achieved by Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three in the training ground of the Inner Palace this time had already given him a lot of surprises. Geniuses always had a lot of privileges. This was the rule that everyone tacitly agreed upon. For a moment, the eyes of all the cultivators present were focused on Long Yanwei. They wanted to know what decision Long Yanwei would make. After all, the reason why Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were able to get the eggs was entirely because of Lord Long. Now that they had done such an outrageous thing, if Lord Long punished them, they were afraid that their future situation in the Penglai Palace would be much worse. Thinking of this possibility, everyone's hearts surged with strong expectations, especially some cultivators whose strength had decreased because of Bailey Hongzhuang's poison. They could not wait for them to disappear from Penglai Palace. However, Long Yanwei's next reaction was beyond everyone's expectations. "Are these guys the ones who lied to you?" Long Yanwei said slowly. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could not help but look at each other. They did not know when Long Yanwei had found out that they had been deceived. However, after thinking about it, they nodded and admitted to it. "That's right, it's them." Long Yanwei glanced at the corpse on the ground and retracted his gaze. "It seems that the way I handled the matter last time is still somewhat unsatisfactory." As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could not help but change. Could it be that Long Yanwei was really angry because of this? Compared to Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three who were worried and nervous, the cultivators who were watching the fight had a wide smile on their faces. As soon as Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three came to Penglai Palace, they enjoyed so many privileges. Everyone had long been envious, jealous and hateful. Now that they saw that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three could finally be punished, everyone was extremely happy in their hearts. "Since everyone is very dissatisfied with the way I handled it, then I won't say anything more." Long Yanwei sighed. Chapter 35-50. In the future, you can deal with this personal grudge on your own. As Long Yanwei's voice fell, all the cultivators present could not help but be stunned. Then they widened their eyes and looked at Long Yanwei in astonishment. Obviously they found it hard to believe. Under such circumstances, he did not blame Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. On the contrary, he changed his previous decision. How could this not be surprising? I also know that some conflicts cannot be suppressed just because you want to. If everyone is not convinced, it is better to find a way to solve it on your own. Penglai Palace has never stopped fights between cultivators. However, before you act, everyone has to consider their own strength. Long Yanwei's expression was indifferent. His words were so calm that they did not contain any emotion. Usually he put his mind on studying monstrous beasts. He did not care about the grudges between cultivators and the system of Penglai Palace. This time, if the matter had not become too big, he would not have intervened. He was also aware of the arrogance in the hearts of these cultivators. Even though this matter was caused by their greed, the punishment that Bailey Hongzhuang gave them was also something that they could not accept. Even though everyone had suppressed this resentment under his pressure, it was absolutely impossible for it to dissipate. This could be seen from how Qing Juanhe and the others had secretly deceived Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Presumably, there were many cultivators in the outer palace who had the same idea. Since that was the case, it was better to let everyone settle their grudges on their own. He believed that after learning from Qing Juanhe and the others' mistakes, everyone would think twice before making a move. Moreover, this was also a test for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the others heard this, they could not help but look at each other. The nervousness in their hearts dissipated a little. At least from Long Yanwei's attitude, they could tell that he was not angry. Ren Ziheng and the others were also surprised. They had always known that Master Long had an extremely good temper, but they did not expect that Master Long would tolerate Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three to such an extent. It could be seen that Master Long did not just admire Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. The other cultivators looked at each other for a moment. Such an outcome was really beyond their expectations. It seems that Master Long really thinks highly of Di Beichen and the other three. Under such circumstances, he is not angry at all. This is too unbelievable. Master Long's temper has always been very good, but this time's matter is indeed unexpected. I didn't expect that they would not be punished. It seems that it will be even more difficult to deal with them in Penglai Palace in the future. Master Long's attitude completely shows that he is on Bailey Hongzhuang's side. Everyone sighed. Although Long Yanwei's words were very neutral and did not show any support for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, he still did not punish Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three under such circumstances. From this point alone, one could see his true attitude. Favoritism. For a moment, this thought appeared in the minds of almost all the cultivators. Chapter 3551. Qing Juanhe was not a nobody in the outer palace. On the contrary, he was very famous and was a popular candidate to be promoted to the inner palace next time. Even though his strength had decreased due to the poison, everyone thought that he should not have been so easily dealt with by Di Beichen. However, the truth was right in front of everyone. Qing Juanhe, who had been cultivating in the Penglai Palace for so long, was not as strong as a new disciple who had just joined the Penglai Palace. From this, it could be seen how outstanding the strength of Di Beichen and the other three were. Therefore, even though everyone was envious and dissatisfied, they could only choose to remain silent in the face of such strength. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three looked at Long Yanwei gratefully. Their previous actions had indeed put Long Yanwei in a very awkward situation. In their opinion, Long Yanwei would definitely be a little angry no matter what. However, they did not expect Long Yanwei to forgive them so easily. Speaking of which, Long Yanwei had been helping them ever since they joined the Penglai Palace. Now he even ignored his own dignity and took care of them. How could they not be grateful? However, under the watchful eyes of everyone, they could not say anything. You have a good temper. Yizihua sighed. He really admired Long Yanwei on this point. If it were anyone else, they would probably be angry no matter what or even fly into a rage. However, Long Yanwei was able to act as if nothing had happened. This had something to do with Long Yanwei's originally calm temperament. However, the bigger reason was probably his admiration for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Hearing Yizihua's words, Long Yanwei smiled faintly. Forget it. Do you and I care about these false reputations? I know that you have never cared about these false reputations. However, I'm afraid that everyone will be very dissatisfied if you are so biased towards them. Yizihua said slowly. If they could also have such strength, I would also be biased towards them. Long Yanwei said with a smile. Seeing this, Yizihua could not help but chuckle. Up to you. He also knew the reason why Long Yanwei did this. If Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had only displayed outstanding talents, he might not have gone to this extent. However, now that Bailey Hongzhuang had a way to subdue the Lich, the situation was completely different. The Liches had always been a huge problem for them. If there was a way to deal with them, it would be much more convenient for them to develop in the future. This point alone was enough to offset most of the mistakes made by Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. He believed that not only Long Yanwei, but even the Hall Master would make the same choice. After that, Long Yanwei's gaze descended onto Di Beichen's group of four, and he said, I just so happen to have some questions for all of you. Come with me. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three hurriedly cupped their hands and said, Yes. Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua were the first to turn and leave. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three hurriedly followed behind them and left together. Ren Ziheng and the others looked at each other. In the end they did not follow. However, when Bailey Hongzhuang and the others left, they gave them a look. After this matter was over, they would have a good gathering. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three followed Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua all the way to Long Yanwei's residence. After entering the house, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three bowed. Chapter 3552. Although Long Yanwei's attitude in the outer hall just now had already made everything clear, they already understood that Long Yanwei was tolerant of them. They would remember this kindness in their hearts. Hearing this, Long Yanwei waved his hand and said with a smile, "This is a personal grudge between you. I don't want to say anything more, but you guys really don't give me any face as usual." Hearing the joking meaning in Long Yanwei's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's expressions were much more relaxed. "Master Long, we respect you very much in our hearts," Ziren hurriedly said with a serious expression on his face. "It's just that Li Xingkai is not an easy guy to deal with. If we give up this opportunity, there will be more trouble in the future." They didn't deliberately want to affect Long Yanwei's dignity, but things happened so coincidentally that they had no other choice. This time, everyone knew that Qing Juanhe was scheming against them behind their backs. If they couldn't solve it, there would be more people coming to trouble them in the future. Killing the chicken to warn the monkey must achieve the best results in the first time, otherwise they wouldn't be able to achieve such good results the next time. They had many enemies in the outer hall, and they didn't want to cause more trouble because of this hesitation. After all, their energy was focused on cultivation and improvement, and they didn't have more time to deal with these complicated conspiracies. "Master Long, this time we were indeed in the wrong first." Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen naturally understood that with Master Long's status in Penglai Palace, today's matter was indeed unbearable. It was precisely because of this that they were even more grateful for Master Long's tolerance. Looking at the grateful and apologetic faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, the smile on Long Yanwei's lips gradually widened. "I was just joking, you don't have to be so serious. If I really cared about these false reputations, I wouldn't have let you go just now." Yi Zihua, who was originally quite critical of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's actions, after seeing their attitude of admitting their mistake at this moment, his face became a little better. In fact, he also admired Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three very much, but he was a little worried that they would be arrogant because of the favor. Fortunately, they still had their own sense of propriety. Now that he thought about it carefully, if he was in Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's perspective, he would probably do the same thing. After all, some things needed to be done at the right time. Hearing Long Yanwei's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. "Calm Long, as Long Yanwei." Long Yanwei's face was full of smiles. One face was full of admiration. Looking at Wen Ziren's flattering appearance, Long Yanwei couldn't help but chuckle. "You don't have to flatter me. You've always been shrewd. If you flatter me, you'll probably take advantage of me again. I'm speaking the truth from the bottom of my heart." Wen Ziren hurriedly patted his chest to express his sincerity. However, Long Yanwei obviously didn't buy Ziren's. A serious look quickly appeared on his face. "I called you here today because I have something to ask you." Chapter 3553. "I heard that all of you have mistakenly barged into the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples this time and even achieved a good performance?" Long Yanwei sized up Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. His dignified and handsome face was gentle and he had a faint smile on his face. "Indeed, we have mistakenly barged into the training grounds. This is all thanks to Qing Juanhe." Di Beichen slowly said, "However, we are only trying our best to save our own lives." Hearing that, Long Yanwei waved his hand. "You don't have to be so humble. I already have some understanding of your strength from the previous incident." Yi Zihua on the side also nodded. The last time Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three made such a big move, it was the first time in Penglai Palace. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, even he would have found it hard to believe. The destructive power that the four cultivators could cause was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. "What I am more interested in is that I heard that you have a way to deal with the lich's chanting?" Long Yanwei's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. This was what they were most concerned about. As Long Yanwei's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three understood that Long Yanwei had purposely gone to the outer palace to look for them. What he was talking about was Bailey Hongzhuang's Guqing technique. Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. She also understood why Ren Zixing and the others would appear among the crowd at that time. They must have reported this matter to Long Yanwei, and Long Yanwei went to the outer palace to look for them. That's right. I also accidentally discovered that the Guqin technique has such an effect. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was calm. She did not have any intention of hiding anything from Long Yanwei. I see. Long Yanwei smiled faintly. Can you tell me how you felt when you used the Guqin technique to deal with the Lich? I found that when I used the Guqin technique to deal with the Lich, I found that different Guqin sounds would have different effects. The Lich's chanting also seems to have some changes. However, I have not been in contact with the Lich for a long time, so my understanding is not comprehensive. Thinking back, in the process of dealing with the Lich, Bailey Hongzhuang had only tried some of the methods he had mastered. Different Guqin sounds did indeed have different effects, but she had only fought with the Lich for a short time. If she wanted to get a more specific answer, she was afraid that she could not give a more specific answer. Long Yanwei nodded his head. You are able to subdue the Lich's method. This is already a huge gain for us. Yizihua was also very interested in Bailey Hongzhuang. According to your judgment, do you think that only your zither technique has such an effect, or any zither technique can achieve a certain effect? Hearing that, Bailey Hongzhuang pondered for a moment and said, according to my judgment, the Lich's chanting is the power of sound and the Guqin technique is also the power of sound. If my judgment is not wrong, any Guqin technique should have a certain effect. However, the specific effect can only be discovered after a specific person performs it. Are you sure? Yizihua's eyes lit up and his voice became louder. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but look at Yizihua. After pondering for a moment, she nodded her head. I'm sure. Chapter 3554. After receiving Bailey Hongzhuang's confirmation, Yizihua and Long Yanwei's face simultaneously revealed a touch of joy. This was undoubtedly excellent news for them. If only Bailey Hongzhuang's zither technique could achieve such an effect, then things would be more complicated and it would be very difficult to suppress the Lich. After all, this method was in the hands of Bailey Hongzhuang alone. If they wanted Bailey Hongzhuang to hand over this method, it would be very difficult. But if others could also do this, then it would be different. At least, this proved that they had a method to deal with the Lich. This would be of great help to their disciples when they went to the training grounds. At the same time, it could also reduce the casualties of their disciples. If that's the case, then it's really great. A smile appeared on Yizihua's face. Bailey Hongzhuang, if we can prove that this is true, then you will have made a great contribution. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. She didn't feel much joy because of Yizihua's words of making a great contribution. She just happened to master the zither technique and discovered this after facing the Lich. If other cultivators who mastered the zither technique were present, she believed that they would also discover this. We will send people to verify the effect of the zither technique. If it can really subdue the Lich, then we will report this news to the palace master. Long Yanwei's admiring gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang. He had always admired Bailey Hongzhuang. In fact, the reason why he decided to recruit Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three was not only because of their tyrannical fighting talent, but also because Bailey Hongzhuang's contract beast made him very interested. Now, after seeing Bailey Hongzhuang's various performances in Penglai Palace, he increasingly felt that this woman was able to obtain such a level of contract beast because of herself. At the very least, ordinary cultivators would be very happy after hearing Yizihua's words. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was neither sad nor happy. She was unexpectedly mature. I hope my judgment is not wrong. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a smile, her voice gentle and natural. Although the matter had not been confirmed, both Long Yanwei and Yizihua had a certain amount of confidence in Bailey Hongzhuang's judgment. Later, I'll send someone to find a cultivator who has mastered the music technique. However, there aren't many cultivators who have mastered this skill. Yizihua sighed. The main reason why no one had discovered that music could be used against the Liches was because there were very few cultivators who had mastered music. The zither music technique itself was a very powerful martial skill, but this skill was a little special. If one didn't master it well, then ordinary zither music technique would be in a weak position when facing other cultivators. It could be said that it was very difficult to achieve certain results. Unless one could cultivate the zither music technique to a very outstanding level, such cultivators would often be able to achieve great results. However, it was not an easy thing to cultivate it to an outstanding level. Chapter 3555. Although you've mistakenly entered the training grounds this time, the results you've achieved have really impressed me. Long Yanwei's gaze once again fell on Di Baichen and the others. Previously, Ren Ziheng and the others had praised them exceedingly. They had almost given all the credit to the four of them. Hearing Long Yanwei's praise, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others smiled at the same time. They knew that this was definitely the result of Ren Ziheng and the others' report. This had completely exceeded their expectations. Before this, none of them had thought that Ren Ziheng and the others would report this matter to Yi Zihua and give all the credit to them. However, now that they knew all of this, they understood the sincerity of Ren Ziheng and the others. If they were selfish, they could take all the credit for themselves. After all, if the other party was not Yi Zihua, most people would not believe them even if they said that the credit was given to Di Baichen and the others. As a result, they were even more certain that Ren Ziheng and the others were friends worth making. Although they had been deceived into entering the training grounds of the Inner Hall disciples and had almost lost their lives, they were fortunate to have made a group of good friends. In comparison, this harvest was already considered to be extremely good. Lord Long, I have a question to ask. Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly spoke. Long Yanwei also glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang. His eyes flickered with a wise light. You want to ask about the training grounds of the Inner Hall disciples? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. That's right. I never knew that such a place existed in the Xingqian continent. This has really exceeded my expectations. May I know where this place came from? Bailey Hongzhuang had been curious about this for a long time. However, Ren Ziheng and the others had not given her a reasonable explanation. 1,000 years ago, she was still very familiar with the Xingqian continent. At that time, there was no such thing as a skeleton army. Moreover, the current Xingqian continent was completely different from before. She wanted to know more about it. Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua glanced at each other. After pondering for a moment, they said, "This question is not something that an outer palace disciple should know. However, since the both of you have come into contact with the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples in advance, I believe that the both of you will become a member of the Inner Palace disciples sooner or later. So, it doesn't matter if you know about it earlier." As soon as he said that, the eyes of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three lit up. They were very curious about this matter. This matter can be said to be extremely complicated. Long Yanwei slowly spoke out. A few hundred years ago, a shocking war occurred in the Xingqian continent, and the number of genius cultivators that fell was countless. At that time, a mysterious force had appeared in the Xingqian continent. They had mastered the power of darkness and could turn fallen cultivators into skeletons, allowing them to regain their fighting strength. This force was extremely terrifying. They wanted to use this method to increase their influence. In the end, the various major forces in the Xingqian continent decided to encircle and annihilate them. The result was naturally a victory. However, the price they paid was also very high. This was because the destructive power of darkness was extremely tyrannical. Coupled with its mysteriousness, it resulted in this. Chapter 3556. Listening to Long Yanwei's narration, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's faces were filled with deep shock. They had never heard of such news before. Even in the history books of the Xingqian continent, there were no records of this. Previously, in order to understand what had happened in the past 1,000 years, Bailey Hongzhuang had specially flipped through the relevant history books of the Xingqian continent. However, she did not obtain any useful information. Now that she had heard everything from Long Yanwei, she finally understood a little. This dark force is extremely powerful. Back then, those cultivators who died seemed to have been cursed. Their corpses eventually turned into a skeleton army. Even now, the cultivators who died would also become a member of the skeleton army. The skeleton army's destructive power and influence are extremely powerful. Furthermore, under their assimilation, this force will become more and more powerful. If it is not controlled, the consequences will be unimaginable. Because of this, our various major forces have always been working hard to control the influence of the skeleton army. This is so that it will not affect the lives of normal cultivators. The fundamental reason why the Penglai Island maintains a certain distance from the outside world is also because of this. Once the skeleton army comes into contact with ordinary people in the outside world, its destructive power will increase by several folds. Therefore, only cultivators who have reached the 5th level of the Purple Realm can come here. As Long Yanwei's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were in a state of deep shock. They had always thought that the Penglai Island was a place where outstanding cultivators gathered. However, they did not expect that the fundamental reason for this was that the Penglai Island was established to protect the outside world. When they found out about this, their hearts could be said to be extremely shocked. Everything had a reason. Perhaps this was because the stronger one was, the greater the responsibility. Looking at the shocked expressions on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's faces, Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua were very calm. In fact, every cultivator who came to the Penglai Island and found out about the truth had the same reaction. I didn't expect there to be such a reason. It's really an eye-opener. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but sigh. Although she didn't know what kind of war had taken place hundreds of years ago, nor did she know how terrifying the dark forces were, she could feel that the war back then was absolutely earth-shattering from the skeleton army she had seen. This dark force was too terrifying. Controlling the skeletons was tantamount to having countless helpers. After all, there were many corpses in this world. Not only that, but because of that great battle back then, the situation of the entire Xingqian continent has also undergone a great change, Long Yanwei said indifferently. As soon as he said this, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes couldn't help but light up. I wonder how the situation in the Xingqian continent has changed? The Xingqian continent in the past was completely different from how it was now. She had always wanted to know what kind of changes had taken place, but no one she had come into contact with could give her a definite answer. Chapter 3557. Bailey Hongzhuang had always felt that this was a little strange. This was because she was very clear about the foundation and influence of those old forces. Logically speaking, even after so many years, with the strength that they had accumulated, it was not impossible for them to maintain it. At the very least, among so many forces, there must be some that could be preserved. However, she seemed to have touched the peak of the Xingqian continent, but she had never come into contact with those forces. This was really too strange. What she could not understand the most was that the strength of the Xingqian continent 1,000 years ago was much stronger than what she had come into contact with now. Could it be that after the Great War many years ago, the strength of the entire Xingqian continent had declined? Long Yanwei was silent for a moment, then said, "You will slowly come to know this when you become an inner palace disciple and your strength has increased. With your current situation, you will not be able to come into contact with it for the time being. We will not tell you for the time being. In fact, this world is much more complicated than you think." Yi Zihua also nodded. "When it's time to know, you will know sooner or later." Seeing Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua's attitude, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three could not help but look at each other. They were even more puzzled in their hearts. Long Yanwei had already told them about the skeleton army. They did not expect that he would keep the situation of the Xingqian continent a secret. This was really puzzling. However, they did not ask in the end because they believed that since Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua had such an attitude, they must have their reasons. Since they were still unable to come into contact with that level with their current strength, it was better not to be anxious. When it was time to know, they would know sooner or later. "Thank you for your guidance, Lord Long. I have understood a lot." Bailey Hongzhuang cupped her hands. If Long Yanwei had not told them about this situation, they would have even more doubts in their hearts. Hearing this, Long Yanwei smiled faintly. "There is a reason why I have such high hopes for you. I believe that you have enough confidence to be promoted to Inner Palace Disciple, right?" Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three also smiled. "Lord Long, please rest assured. We will definitely become Inner Palace Disciples. We will definitely not embarrass you." "Then I'm relieved." Long Yanwei nodded his head. The smile on his face widened a little. However, an ordinary cultivator is unable to come into contact with this internal information. Only the members of the inner hall of the various large factions are able to understand everything. I have decided to tell all of you since all of you have coincidentally come to know a little about it. All of you cannot spread this information out now. Do you understand? We understand. We won't leak a single word about this. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had serious expressions on their faces. This was something that Ren Ziheng and the others had told them before. This was because if this news was leaked out prematurely and ordinary cultivators knew about it, it would definitely cause a certain amount of panic, which was not beneficial at all. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three understood this point, Long Yanwei also relaxed a little. Since that's the case, then there's nothing else. I'm afraid that the training ground this time is also very tiring. Go back and have a good rest first. Chapter 3558. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were about to leave, there was a sudden knock on the door. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three immediately quickened their steps. no longer bothering Long Yu and Huihui. I never thought that something like this had happened in the Xingqian continent before. Then, the reason why the skeletons we saw became like this was entirely because of the power of darkness? Shengguan Yingying's face flashed with amazement. Previously, when Ren Ziheng and the others told them about it, it was not so specific. Now that she knew the reason for all this, she only felt that it was too inconceivable. Before witnessing it with her own eyes, she simply could not believe that there was a power that could restore a corpse's fighting strength. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. That should be the case. I've never seen the power of darkness before, but it must be a very terrifying power. The dark aura that we felt in the training grounds of the inner hall disciples, as well as the black qi that could not be removed from our bodies after we were injured, should all belong to the power of darkness. Just from this point alone we can see how terrifying it is. Thinking about it, the battle back then must have been very tragic. There are not many people who have mastered this power, but its destructive power must be extremely powerful. Di Beichen spoke slowly in a deep voice. His eyes were as deep as the sea, filled with the light of wisdom. Xiren sighed. In this world there are only things that can't be imagined, but nothing can't happen. If I can master this power of darkness, it will be very terrifying. Speaking of this, Xiren's eyes could not help but light up as an idea flashed through his mind. Do you think there are still cultivators who have mastered the power of darkness? Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly and shook her head. I don't know. Even if there are, I'm afraid that they wouldn't dare to show their talents. I think it's very likely that such a cultivator still exists. After all, even if the cultivators who grasped the power of darkness back then were wiped out by other forces, since this power existed, it definitely wouldn't disappear completely. Someone will continue to pass it on. Just like the inheritances we've seen before, all powers will exist in a secret way, Di Beichen said. Bailey Hongzhuang glanced at Di Beichen and agreed with what the latter said. You're right, it's very likely. If a cultivator who has mastered the power of darkness really exists, then his strength must be very terrifying. Even if he's tyrannical, it's useless. He doesn't even dare to use it openly. Xiren shrugged. It must be a very frustrating feeling. Forget it, there's no need to think so much. Shengguan Yingying curled her lips. In the future we Hongzhuang to de Hongzhuang, Hongzhuang to S's.